So I reviewed The Confidence Code by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman, and it was a book that I really enjoyed. The authors do a fantastic job framing the issue of confidence, looking at some of the brain science and psychology behind confidence, and then looking at ways that we can develop more confident habits and actually raise young women to have more confidence and support a culture of more female confidence around us. So a couple things that I want to pull out that I think are going to be useful to you. So they have a definition for confidence that I think is fantastic and, was almost like seeing an old friend because it deeply aligns with the way that we talk about confidence in the Build Yourself workshop. So they talk about confidence as the stuff that transforms thought into action, right? Confidence is about acting and about doing. And in the work that I do with women and in the Build Yourself workshop, our workshop is entirely focused on getting new frameworks, but then transforming those frameworks into some action in your life, even if it doesn't work out the way that you intended it to. And I have come to believe that confidence is and willingness to ask for what we want are the kind of core frameworks that run across everything that I teach. So the authors do a really good job of framing confidence in terms of a couple of issues that I see women struggle with. And they relate to this issue of turning thought into action. So one is perfectionism, right? Being so focused on the perfect that we struggle to act, right? We struggle to get something out the door. We spend too long on something. Another one is over-preparing. So this is, it was almost kind of heartbreaking to hear about really, really talented women who work twice as hard as men in order to, do what they need to do and to succeed. And that's been part of their success. And while that's admirable, and we always hear, right, a woman has to work 2 times as hard as men, I just don't think that that's manageable. I don't think that we can ask a class of society to work twice as hard consistently over the course of their lives and just be okay with it. That, things break down, people burn out. And so, over-preparing, overthinking is another big one that they talk about. They talk a lot about decision-making as well. So they talk about a story of a woman who was brought into her boss's office and she thought she was going to be given a pat in the back. And instead he said to her, you need to learn how to make quicker, more confident decisions. Even if you're wrong, your team needs to know that that you're in charge and that you can decide things and that things aren't going to stay undecided or figured out by context, right? You can't move to the next level until you figure out how to do that and how to make stronger, more quick decisions. So, they also talk about, why do we have all of these struggles? Some of it has to do with issues of likability. Likability and people pleasing are a big theme in the workshop. And women struggle for many, many historic reasons with wanting to be liked and not just wanting to be respected or thought of as doing well in our jobs. And that has both plus sides and minus sides, right? Being likable is actually really, really important to job growth. And they bring up some really interesting brain research that shows that women's hemispheres, their right and their left hemisphere, have more connections generally than men's do. So we may be more capable of holistic or open-ended thinking. And we're certainly socialized to be more empathetic and be more socially minded. And so many of these things can be pluses, but the question is when they go too far, they keep us from performing, or they keep us from, speaking out when we need to speak out, or they keep us from making a decision that needs to be made, even if it turns out that it's the wrong decision and we make a mistake and we fail, but we move faster through that process. That's where the issue comes up. So one of the things that I found blew my mind was a couple of studies that they pulled together that look at how women are underestimate their abilities by about 20%, and men on average, the figure that they gave was about 30%. They overestimate their abilities. So if you think about it that way, there's a 50% spread on average between where we think we're doing, right, in terms of our performance, and where men think they're doing in terms of performance. And the big issue is that, our sense of how we're doing, there's a feedback loop between that and our ability to perform confidently. So they tell another story of a of a woman whose boss wanted to promote her, but the one issue was that she didn't speak enough in client meetings, and he didn't want to bring it up because he thought that it might sound sexist to say that, or, he didn't want to rock the boat. But instead of being promoted, this woman just stayed in the same place, right? So, we talk a lot in the workshop about the idea of filling the shoes of the woman who you want to be at work before you get there, right? Like fill the shoes of the woman whose job you want, right? Like, they always say dress for the job. It's kind of like that, but it really is about, it's not really dress like the job. It's move and talk and walk like the job, right? Like express that you can handle it. Because otherwise, unless you have a really, really enlightened supervisor who's looking out for you, you don't look like you're the woman for the job unless you think you're the woman for the job. So performance really, really matters. And one of the studies that they talked about that was just, I can't stop thinking about, looked at honest overconfidence. So people who are overconfident, right, whose confidence outstrips their actual abilities, but who really, really believe in it, right? They're not trying to pull the wool over someone else's eyes. And one of the things that the study found was that people with honest overconfidence were actually the people who gained the most respect and admiration it was in a classroom, of their fellow students. And so over the course, like in regular life, being honestly overconfident actually helps you move farther than the people who are just competent. So the way they frame this is confidence trumps confidence, right? Which, when we first think of it, sounds really empty, right? Like, oh, all I have to do is talk a big talk and then like it's gonna go great from here. And it's not really so much about that, right? Like competence does matter, but it's that women especially spend so much of their time working on their competence and thinking that they're not ready, right? I'm not ready yet. I still need to get better at this job. I couldn't, go open a branch office because I don't really know how to do all of the stuff all of the personnel management, right? I don't know how to do that yet. Whereas a lot of how we move forward is we step into some position that involves some kind of stretch, right? Some kind of growing into the job, and then we figure it out as we go along. And it doesn't mean that we should get promoted 3 levels above where we are or take on a job that we have no clue how to do, but it means that we are probably underestimating how good we're doing by about 20%. And there are people who are doing that job who are overestimating their how good they are. And so if we can give ourselves that like 50% bonus, right? I probably need to think of myself as 50% better than I am. That's how we keep ahead and keep moving forward in our careers. So, how do you build confidence, right? Again, they talk about it as action. You build confidence by doing things over and over and practicing, showing up, being willing to fail, right? All the things that I'm sure you've heard before. They've got one idea which really also resonates with some of the tactics and strategies in the Build Yourself workshop, where it involves taking negative automatic thoughts so that, I think of them as the inner critical voice, right? Negative thoughts that are constantly looping in the back of our minds. I don't know enough about this. This project isn't going to work out so well. Do I look bad in this dress? Like, do I look young? Do I look, is my skin too oily, right? Like, issues of body obviously are deeply tied to other issues of confidence. But when you have a negative automatic thought, what you do is you create a counter narrative, something that is an alternative interpretation. So, this project, I'm underqualified for this project. Well, I did these 3 other things that are related to this project. I've never done something at this level, but the fact that I've done these 3 things, plus I was always very, very good at coming into a messy situation and figuring out how to, where to go from here, right? Like that's a counter narrative. And one of the things they say is that your counter narrative doesn't even have to be so convincing that you're like, oh, that's definitely right. But the practice of creating a counter narrative actually changes the way that your mind thinks of this negative automatic thought as just the word from God, right? So one of the last things that I want to touch on from the book is They talk about about authenticity, right? So authenticity really matters. We can suss out people who have fake confidence from people who don't. And that's okay because, when you first start practicing confidence, it'll feel kind of fake, but you'll grow into it. I think we also think that we need to have a certain male kind of confidence, right? Like when I was growing up, it seemed like I had to just yell really loud and like be incredibly funny. In the youth group that I grew up in, there was a very, very male style of leadership, and I just, didn't even know what to do about it. But turns out that women who express masculine and feminine tendencies are 1.5 times more likely than both men and feminine women, right? Like only feminine women to get promoted, and they're 3 times as likely to get promoted than women who only express masculine tendencies. And I deeply believe that people need to find their own unique strengths, voice. I really think that the uniqueness of our personalities is a deep asset. So I'm not in the business of telling women to be more feminine or more masculine or more this or more that. But you don't need to try on someone else's style, or you can try on their style, but like you don't need to be like someone else in order to be confident, right? There may be things that you change about the way that you speak, things that you change about your body language, things that you change about the pauses you might take before coming up with an answer, right? And those things, especially if they're deeply tied to who you are as a person, can be really effective ways to be authentically confident.